Welcome my fellow inbred YBA players, to this new video. Today I will be bringing you a totally original, not at all overdone and overused, style of video that's never been done before. I'm making a stand review.
Oh! Ew!
Now while I know there are a plethora of other channels bigger than me making stand reviews, I still want to get my personal feelings out there about YBA. With that being said, today we're kicking things off with one of my favorite stands in all of JoJo. That stand being Tusk Act 4. Now, upon hearing that Tusk was my favorite stand, it would be easy to assume that some of you just recoiled in disgust. I can hear some of you pounding your chest like gorillas, getting ready to type out a 5-page essay on why stands like King Crimson Requiem and Star Platinum the World are far better stands than Tusk Act 4, and that I'm a complete brain-dead shitter for even considering it being in my personal top 5 stands. But hear me out. While yes, Tusk is far from being the best stand in the game, I still hold this stand very dear to me. While the overall consensus of the community is that any stand that isn't The World Over Heaven or King Crimson Requiem are more often than not called overrated and underwhelming. And Tusk just so happens to get labeled this a lot, at least in my personal experience. So for this video I wanted to not only give Tusk a stand review but try to explain why Tusk is better than what other players are led to believe. So let's start with how to acquire Tusk Act 4. In order to get Tusk Act 4 you first have to get Tusk Act 1. You can obtain Act 1 by using a ribcage on yourself. To get a ribcage you can either get it from winning Steel Ball Run, rolling it in the arcade, or find one that randomly spawns around the map. Personally I find it easier to find one at random due to the fact that the arcade is too unreliable, and SBR will be completely unwinnable due to large teams, or hackers speeding to the end. Thanks for the anti-cheat by the way, I'm sure it's been super effective against the people it was intended for. Totally not broken and redundant at all. Once you've gotten Act 1, in order to unlock Act 2 you must have a left arm of the Saint's corpse and have the spin spec. When it comes to the arm you can either roll for it in the arcade or get it from winning Steel Ball Run. From this point on, there is no point in rolling in the arcade because in order to get spin, you have to get to the end of Steel Ball Run. May God bless your soul, Godspeed. Now that you've spent the better part of 3 to 4 hours trying to win SBR, you may now unlock Act 2. Now this is where the fun begins. In order to tap into the powers of Act 3, you have to find Jesus and talk to him. He has a small chance of spawning in the average server, but when he does spawn he will be in one of 5 places. The train station's checkpoints near Giorno, the cafe, the pizzeria, or the Naples castle. Time for a 20-minute run around the map in hopes of finding Jesus.
By the way, did I mention that is only a 1% chance every 5 minutes?
The only requirements needed to talk to him is to have Tusk Act 2 and have spin, which by this point you should already have. Proceed to talk to Jesus and unlock Act 3. At this point, any person that wants to keep all of their brain cells intact would stop here. Most people consider Act 3 to be a pretty solid Tusk variant, but you see, there's only one problem with stopping here. I don't have any more brain cells to lose, so fuck it. Let's fucking finish this. Maybe afterwards I can get around to finish in my bottle of Clorox and call it a day. In order to reach Act 4 you must acquire the pelvis of the Saint's corpse. That means it's time to go back to SBR and suffer for another 2 hours. Good luck and have fun. Luckily for me, I've played this game for so long I have multiple of the items I needed for this video. I didn't have to go into SBR, sucks to sucks dipshits. I only went in for the footage and I'm never going back. Anyway, once you've won the pelvis, head back to the main game, and reap the benefits of all your hard work and effort. And be prepared to be reminded that you're still shit at the game by the world over heaven user, as he casually proceeds to bash your skull down your windpipe. And thus, you've unlocked Tusk Act 4. Now that you've gained the powers of Act 4, we can now get into the skill tree and moveset. If you want to completely max out your skill tree for Tusk Act 4, you'll have to set aside a total of 66 skill points, which isn't that much all things considered. To max out your human race, it would cost you a total of 44 skill points. Seeing that maxing out Tusk cost you 66 points out of the overall 100, you'd probably have to skimp out of some of the skill tree. Personally, my skill tree looks like this, but I don't really use specs, so it's probably gonna be different depending on the player. Now time to get into the moves available to you, using Act 4. First things first, mouse ones. They do a total of 9 damage per hit, and are going to be the most used thing, as with any stand. Heavy punch, double right click, dose 11.5 damage per hit. Barrage, default button E and does 1.5 damage per hit, recommended to use only after your opponent has already thrown out their barrage. Barrage finisher, default button R, does 18 damage and is recommended to be used after a barrage. Now onto the non-basic moveset. Nail shot, default buttons T. The nails are shot 3 times and deal 8 damage per hit for a total of 24 damage. Golden rectangle nail, default button Y, shoots 1 nail and deals 24 damage. This move should always be used after nail shot for maximum efficiency. Wormhole nail, default button X, shoots any nails that's missed recently, so the damage tends to vary. Wormhole uppercut, default button C, shoots a nail into the ground and uppercuts your opponent, dealing 13.5 damage. The second hit deals 6.7, followed by a mini beatdown, dealing 1.5 per hit or a total of 15 damage, and the final hit dealing 6.7. Overall, the whole move deals a combined total of 41.9 damage. A pretty powerful move, only being led by the famous Tusk Act 4 beatdown, default button G, coming in with a combined total of 67.3 damage, and that's without taking into consideration the 0.2 and 0.3 barrages. Let me tell ya now, if you haven't invested in vitality, this move will do a number on your health. Finally, Tusk Act 4 has access to 2 non-combat focused moves. Fingernail glide, default button Z. This move lets you glide for a total of 7 seconds and can be used as a method to maneuver around your opponents, or glide from rooftop to rooftop for fun. Finally, T-time, default button H, heals you by 40.6, best used after avoiding your opponent with nail glide. Overall, I think the moveset is pretty solid. I have no real complaints here. When it comes to YBA, I don't really focus too much on the technicality. If you're looking for that sort of thing, you might want to go to another channel. It's probably a pretty indicative thing to say, considering I'm doing a stand review, but whatever. Now personally, I would consider myself a sort of Act 4 connoisseur. I feel like Tusk is an overall, slept on stand when it comes to YBA. While there are plenty of Act 4 users in the game, I can't help but feel like they get overturned by the vapid amount of 6th graders that spend all their time using Star Platinum the World to be absolute degenerates in main game and SBR. These people tend to ask me why I even bother playing Act 4 when I could easily get a meta stand like King Crimson or the World Over Heaven, and to that question I always tell them the same thing. Fun. I find playing all Tusk variants to be pretty fun, but that just might be me. I mean, why would I spend hours playing a stand I don't enjoy casually for the sole sake of being good at the game, when I could get 10 times the enjoyment for hitting salty soy boys with funny nail shots and watching them completely mauled and tell me I'm nail spamming. It's truly one of the most euphoric things I've ever experienced in this game. Side note here, it's pretty common for Tusk users to get labeled as spammers, due to the moveset we have. But I find that argument to be pretty fucking stupid considering that nail shots make up the majority of Tusk's moves. As a wise man once said,
if somebody's move is off cooldown and they use it, that's the right decision. And if they're not using a move while it's off cooldown, then they're just being a moron. How often do you have moves off of cooldown and then you don't use them?
let's sit down for a minute and think about this, right? In order to not be labeled a spammer, I would have to limit myself by not using any of my nail-related moves, so that means I can only use my basic barrage, finisher, heavy punch, T-time, nail glide and beatdown. That's 6 out of 11, 2 of which are passive moves, so it's really only about 4. So going by your ape brain logic, in order to not be a spammer in your eyes I have to nerf myself by removing about 64% of my kit? Really? I'm sorry to break it to ya pal, but if I'm able to shoot my nails, I'm gonna shoot my nails. And no amount of hemming and hawing is gonna prevent me from doing that. Either stop trying to justify your excuses or stop going against Tusk users altogether. Because it's pretty retarded of you to say I'm not allowed to use moves when Tusk as a stand completely revolves around the fact that it can shoot nails. I'm sure you get plenty of people telling you to stop TS spamming, and that's pretty annoying, isn't it? Exactly. Anyway, I got a bit off topic there. When it comes to the average YBA player, when they use a stand, they want to be able to get right up in their opponent's faces and go full force. But seeing that Tusk is a more long-range focused stand with lower outputs of damage, people immediately write it off as garbage and low-end. But that simply isn't the case. You have to know what you're doing and focus on trying to stay at a long distance. Only when you have no other option but to get close and personal is when things like wormhole uppercut will come into play. But alas, if I keep myself at a distance from the person I'm fighting I get labeled a runner, so there isn't any real way to avoid scrutiny. So when it comes to specs for Tusk, I personally recommend either boxing or spin, though I personally don't use specs when I play, so it's up to you completely. That's all for me. I've said all the things I wanted to at this point. Maybe one day I will do videos on the other 3 acts of Tusk, but for now, not today. Until the next acid trip, my friends. I'm out.